All right, welcome. So this is just going to be a kind of short video talking about outliers, which we're just defining for now as some observation that's either unusual or extreme relative to the rest of the data. And so you could determine, kind of based on our home run example with the baseball players, just kind of subjectively what you would consider to be an outlier. And so in this case, I think it's pretty obvious that this player way over here on the right side, I think most people would consider him to be an outlier. But then, since it is subjective, we might all kind of have a different consideration for whether this next person is an outlier, and then what about this person or these two people. And so the idea is that we might want to have a little bit more of an objective rule for determining which points constitute outliers. And so there are kind of lots of rules that you could probably think of, but we're just going to talk about the most common one, which is to find these two what are called fences and consider any point that is larger than this upper fence or smaller than this lower fence to be an outlier. And so let's just see how this rule kind of works out for this baseball example. And so if we took the first quartile and subtracted 1.5 times the IQR, so the IQR is 16 minus 3, which I'm just grabbing from that from our summary stats from before, and that will just be plugged in right here, so that our lower fence is 3 minus 1.5 times 13. If you do that calculation, that turns out to be negative 16.5 home runs. Because there aren't any observations lower than negative 16.5, so you can't even have a negative amount of home runs, obviously, then that means that there's no lower outliers, and so that's kind of halfway through. Then we also need to calculate our upper fence. And so if you did that calculation, that turns out to be 35.5 home runs. And so that just means that any number of home runs more than 35.5 is an outlier, at least according to this rule. On our dot plot, that kind of means it looks like if that's about 40, 39, 38, 76. So it looks like by that rule, all of these points would be considered outliers. So it looks like there's 6 total outliers in this baseball data set. Okay, so we'll see these outliers kind of come up again when we make box plots, since they're graphed on those a little bit more specifically. But other than that, it's always nice to kind of think about outliers in our data set and what those outliers might be and what they might tell us about the underlying data that we've collected.